and welcome to Retronic Relics, the retro video game show where I give you my 2-bit opinion on these 8 through 32-bit relics. Today, we return to Planet Saturn to embark on the great adventure that is...
There's never been a game like Sega Saturn's Knights. Never been a game that's allowed you to fly, fluid and free, in real-time 3D. Never, not anywhere. But especially not on that other system. Simply because, with only one processor, it doesn't have the power to do it. Fly, plaything, fly. You're not ready.
Yes, Knights into Dreams, Sega's main 3D mascot adventure for the Sega Saturn, which helped define the system as a platform willing to take risks and host games that were fresh and amazing. Sonic Team threw themselves into its development rather than working on Sonic the Hedgehog's 3D debut, which would have been a sure bet to tackle you-know-who.
Hello!
With the market demand for 3D games growing, the pressure increased for Sega to get into the mix. Yuji Naka and company had been working on the concept for Knights, going back to the production of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and started development while they were wrapping up work on Sonic & Knuckles. Naka and his team wanted to produce games that went beyond Sonic, so they pursued the development of a new character for Sega's next console. Sonic fans weren't happy, but, I mean, let's get real, are they ever?
Meow?
Now, calling Knights a 3D platformer is a bit of a misnomer. It's different from any other 3D platformer or action game I've ever played, and it's kind of difficult to explain to someone coming in cold how, but let's give it a shot.
Giddy up.
In Knights, you take control of one of two protagonists, Claris or Elliot. Both of them have anxiety over recent events and are having nightmares as a result. That's when they find themselves in the dream world, Nightopia, where they learn of the evil Wiseman the Wicked, who has taken over this land and created an army of evil minions called Nightmare. He plans to collect enough dream energy from sleeping humans to break into our reality, where he'll
take on the world.
Claris and Elliot each have 3 unique stages called Dreams, and a final shared stage that you can't unlock without achieving a minimum C rank on the rest of the levels. At the beginning of the dream, you possess 5 colorful orbs called Idea, which are the dream energy Wiseman is after. Each colored Idea represents a different aspect of a dreamer's personality: purity, wisdom, hope, intelligence, and courage. In the distance, you see a structure called the Idea Palace, where a dancing purple jester is beckoning you. This is Knights, the only Nightmare to not follow Wiseman's evil plot, which is why they've been locked away in this, gazebo?
What do I look like, a real estate agent?
Starting out, Knights feels like any other 3D platformer. You can walk around in full 360 degrees, spin the camera around with the triggers, and you can jump progressively higher, the same way you can in Mario 64, by hitting the jump button repeatedly as you walk. That, however, is where the similarities between these two games ends. As you step forward, you get jumped by a gang of Nightmaren who steal all but one of your Idea, and trap the rest in floating prisons called Idea Captures, leaving your chosen hero with the Idea of Courage. Stepping into the palace dualizes you with Knights, and changes the entire control scheme to a 2D plane. This is the moment that shocks and confuses most new players.
What's happening?
If you try to fly into the background to get an item, you can't. Suddenly, you can only move right, left, up, and down. That's because Knights gameplay is locked onto a set path, which, oddly enough, actually helps create the sensation of free flight better than having total freedom of movement. Give me a minute to explain. Consider games like Mr. Mosquito or Superman 64. Yes, your character is flying and you can move in any direction, but I'd argue that both of these games make flight feel more like a chore, with complicated controls that cause clumsy, bumbling movements to get anywhere. Meanwhile, flying in Knights just comes naturally. The analog stick moves Knights around, and your speed is determined by how far you push it. No confusing acceleration or deceleration mechanics to contend with. Hitting the triggers also allows you to do a series of acrobatic stunts, which adds to the graceful whimsy you experience while playing. It beats spending what seems like an eternity to get reoriented while angry giant Yamada tries to murder you with fireballs.
I didn't want to use this, but...
You can also perform a drill attack, which allows you to pick up great speed, smash through objects, and hit enemies. I'd suggest catching them in a paraloop, however, since hitting them with the drill attack just turns them into a bouncy ball that gets in your way. Now, that's unless you're working on your A-Life system.
Hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Using the dash also drains your drill attack meter, which you can replenish by collecting chips and stars, creating links, or grabbing the all-dash power panel. It's similar to the boost mechanic in contemporary Sonic games, but you can't really abuse this system the same way. Each dream in the game is broken up into 4 courses called mares. These are the fixed paths that Nights follows. You can see each track if you access the Dream Data screen from the Stage Select menu. The fixed courses makes it tempting to lump Nights in with games that are considered on rails, but I would argue that Nights isn't. Take Star Fox or the Panzer Dragoon series, for example. As fluid as the controls are, you still have moments where you are stiffly moving around the screen to target your next enemy. Being on rails also means you're not only a slave to the path, but a slave to the pace of the stage, and everything feels more like a series of scenarios than chance encounters, almost like a saloon shooter. Nights' flight mechanics are far more organic, and it never feels mechanical or dull. You also have the option to double back, and you move along at your own pace. It's a true symbiosis of man and machine.
Power extreme.
The object of the game is to free to capture the Idea by collecting 20 blue orbs called chips, which are scattered throughout the stage. Overload the Idea capture and free the Idea. Returning the Idea to the palace at the start of the course opens up the next mare. Complete 4 mares and you enter the Nightmare, where you encounter the stage's boss. A huge nightmare in a rich, colorful, surrealistic void.
More on that later.
Along with the chip counter and score, you may also notice the timer at the top of the screen. This can lead new players to think that Nights is all about time attack and that you're rewarded for finishing mares quickly. This is half true, and it's where Nights really gets its hooks into you.
The hooks, me bucko. They're back. Beware the hooks.
The hooks?
You are awarded a bonus for freeing the Idea quickly. However, taking it straight back to the palace will cost you points that you lose in bonus time. In bonus time, all the blue chips turn gold and respawn each time you finish a lap. Your goal is to collect as many of them as you can before time runs out, while also flying through giant rings and collecting stars, which all add to your link counter. Higher links and more chips equal a higher score, which makes your rank climb. It is, in essence, an arcade-style score attack game with racing mechanics and free flight. Nights does not have a health bar. Instead, you can lose 5 seconds from your time by touching dangerous obstacles or taking damage from an enemy, which makes it really similar to iChoaniki in that respect. Okay, but what if the timer runs out? Not quite. Well, not in the dream anyway. Instead, Nights returns to the Idea Palace, and Claris or Elliot fall to the ground and drop all of their chips, which you can gather up again. A signature move from Sonic Team, if ever there was one. If you haven't overloaded the Idea capture yet, you must collect the remaining chips needed and bring them back on foot. Then you collect the stolen Dream Energy and huff it back to the Idea Palace at the start of the mare. The highest rank you can achieve if you finish the mare this way is a C, which is generous considering how ungraceful this looks.
Catch me, Lord! Catch me! Wait! Ow! What have we done to make God angry? You did it!
If you already have the Idea, you don't lose it. You just lose your chips and have to make the walk of shame with the Idea back to the palace and accept the lower rank.
Here's your sign.
Now, maybe you're a die-hard platforming collectathon enthusiast who doesn't care how high they rank. Nerd! It is possible to explore the stages as Claris or Elliot on foot, but you soon find that these levels were designed with flight in mind. Walking around is greatly discouraged by the terrain. Not to mention Wiseman's alarm clock creature, which shows up to wake our hero to stop them from challenging his desire for evil do.
The evil do that I do.
Speaking of wise men, that's the perfect segue to the games. Knights host some very unique and sometimes confusing bosses. Gilwing is a giant dragon flying laps around his nightmare who can hit you with either his sharp teeth or the spikes on his tail. Puffy is a floating fat opera singer. And Claus is a pyromaniac cat that sets off mouse-shaped fireworks that fly towards knights and take away 5 seconds of your time. Each boss is like a puzzle that needs to be solved, and there's no one-size-fits-all plan of attack. You also can't replenish your drill attack meter, so you need to use it wisely. Unlike the stages, the bosses and knights actually do operate on a time attack model. Winning the battle quickly builds up a score multiplier, which adds to your overall rank, and can turn an average C rank for the Dream into an A rank if you're fast enough. Beat the boss and your score is tallied, and you return to the main menu. Run out of time and it's night over. Your score is not recorded, and you have to start over from the beginning of that stage.
Lame.
While gameplay is definitely Knight's strong suit, in my humble opinion, the first thing everybody notices is its beautiful graphics. Magical gardens, sunny seasides, and squishy landscapes where the terrain actually reacts to knights flying by are all presented in bright, beautiful colors. Absolutely stunning for a 3D console game in 1996. It really was something to see and has aged remarkably well when you compare it to other 3D games of the era. Boom! Hot take! Now there are moments where the draw distance isn't great, but Sonic Team made a point of ensuring the most important things come into view with plenty of time for you to react, and the game plays at a constant frame rate with very little slowdown. Knights doesn't just look and handle great, it also has what is probably one of the best soundtracks of any game in the 90s, nay, any game ever. But how could it not with Tomoko Sasaki and Sonic CD composer Naofumi Hataya composing tracks? I mean, Naofumi really put the Sonic in Sonic Team. Both of these soundtracks are held up as examples of excellent video game music today, and it's easy to see why. It's also really easy to draw comparisons between the two. Now, the music in Knights doesn't just sound great. It actually changes dynamically thanks to an evolving music engine that is tied to the game's A-Life system. The A-Life, or artificial life system in Knights, is actually tied to the native residents of Knightopia, the Knightopians, which are little cherub-like creatures that fly around the stage. Now, it's easy to write them off as mere set dressing, but the game actually tracks their mood based on how you treat them. Flying by them and hatching their eggs that you find in the stage will create more Knightopians, and they will also breed with each other, which means the more you play Knights, the more Knightopians will appear. Remember that bouncing ball thing you could do with the Nightmarin that I mentioned? You can do that to crossbreed Nighttopians with the Nightmarin to make a variety of new creatures called Meepians, which share characteristics of enemies and Nighttopians. When I was a kid, I would run into these things and I thought it was a glitch. But no, it's very intentional. Making them might not be intentional, but their look is intentional.
I tried to play God, and I failed.
Daddy, no!
If this seems weirdly familiar, it's because Knight's A-Life system was actually the basis for Sonic Adventure's Chow Garden. You know, that whole subsystem in Sonic Adventure where you would take random animals and combine them with your Chow to give them different physical attributes.
Anyway...
Oh, right, the music. Jeez, I forgot why we started talking about this whole thing in the first place. The A-Life system drives the evolving music engine that actually changes the tempo, pitch, and melody of the soundtrack depending on the state of your Nighttopians. This system also makes use of the Saturn's internal clock, which can affect things depending on the time of day in the real world. I can't overstate this. There is very little that Knights doesn't do, nor is there much that it doesn't do well.
Alright, I get it! Stop already!
So, what do I think?
You serious?
To tell you how I really feel about Knights, I need to get into a few spoilers. I know, since when do I give advance warning about spoilers? Spoiler, she doesn't make it.
Hey yo, what the
Seriously though, if you haven't played Knights, skip to this timecode to see my rating and get the rest of the show. I'll give you a second to fumble for the mouse or slider or whatever you're using to jog this crazy thing. Without looking at the guide, we know the story is about two children who are dealing with self-doubt. Elliot, who dreams of losing a basketball game against a skilled rival, Claris, who dreams of bombing at an audition, and Knights, who is somehow connected to them both. Once you get into the game, you don't really think about the story too much. Until you unlock Twin Seeds, the locked final stage that I mentioned at the top of this video. Twin Seeds is the only dream that isn't a fantastical wonderland. It resembles the city where Claris and Elliot both live, and it's the only stage that both of them share. At the jump, you can tell something is different. And then zap! A ghostly image of Wiseman the Wicked fills the screen, and in a flash, you hurtle off into the sky, losing all of your Idea and landing on a small floating island. As a teenager, I was stuck on this platform for perhaps longer than I should have been. I utterly missed the point of the Course 1 signs that were conveniently placed within sight of where I had landed. And I racked my brain for a good 10 minutes trying to figure out how I was supposed to cross the seemingly bottomless chasm between me and Knights. Without being able to dualize with Knights, it seemed hopeless. And that's when it hit me. Throughout the entire game, Claris and Elliot have had two things in common: crushing self-doubt and a reliance on Knights to give them flight and help them rush through the dream world. Claris and Elliot must face the same harsh truth we all face growing up. There won't always be someone there to help you. This moment may be the smartest piece of storytelling that has ever been attempted in this medium. You're left with a choice. Stay planted on your safe pedestal and let the world pass you by until someone else comes along to save it. Or walk up to that ledge and jump. The camera looks down for the clouds as you vanish into the distance. And then the music swells as your character triumphantly spins up into the sky, reunited with the Idea of courage and flying without the aid of Knights. Now the word emotional gets slapped onto a lot of narrative-heavy tearjerkers that are coming out today, but I've never felt the way I do playing Knights, playing any other game. The sequence forces you to consider your options and jump headlong into the unknown, just like some of the most important decisions that real life forces us to make. The feeling you get from this is so brilliant because it was achieved without relying on corny dialogue or forcing you to sit through a ton of cutscenes. This moment, and the entire game leading up to it, tell a more interesting and compelling story than some RPGs that have novels worth of text in the codex alone. It perfectly captures that feeling of catharsis that life creates so effortlessly.
Get a room!
In summary, Nights into Dreams is an action-packed, genre-defying journey through a surrealistic dream world that seamlessly combines arcade score attack gameplay with aspects of racing, 3D platforming, and free flight. Once you've mastered Nights, it doesn't take very long to complete its 7 stages, but its unique scoring mechanics, a life system, and unlockable 2-player versus mode will keep you coming back and challenging your past scores again and again. I didn't even get into how Nights can shapeshift for different challenges, or how the game will cycle bosses at the end of stages once you beat it, let alone Christmas Nights, which is basically bonus content for the main game featuring cool stuff.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Okay, point taken, I've overstayed my welcome. Nights is the perfect package of unique visuals, gameplay, and sound design that masterfully tells a story with few clues and no dialogue. Yet Nights manages to stir up a real emotional response that is uncommon in any medium. That's why I'm giving Nights into Dreams a perfect 10 Nightopia. Hey, wait a minute. How did this Meepian get in here? Whee! Yes, 10 Nightopians out of 10.
No more.
Sure you don't have room for another little bonus level?
Here comes a new challenger!
Just when you thought you couldn't take any more, it's time for the RetroNick Mailbag, the part of the show where you get to be heard. Here's what you had to say about my review of Sword of Sedan for the Sega Genesis. Retro Game Squad opines,
you'd be hard-pressed to find a more dedicated gaming masochist.
He's secretly a masochist.
K-Ron Higgs Poet points out,
there's a punishment that kills you instantly for mixing the potions in this game that has a text that says, winners don't do drugs, okay? Eesh! Just when you thought it wasn't cruel enough.
Who taught you how to do this stuff?
You, alright? I learned it by watching you.
Def DC laments,
back then EA had a history of mostly quality games. I bought this blind, and I rarely had money for games. What a bummer.
Man, that sucks!
Eddie K600 reminisces,
I had this game as an impressionable 11-year-old. It had blood, so I loved it. What a piece of shit game. My parents should have put me in therapy when they found me playing this. Not because of the violence, you see, but because I could convince myself something this terrible was awesome.
Looks like this kid needs some therapy.
As usual, I'd like to give a major shout out to my friends over at Retro Game Squad, who you've heard from in my review of Street Fighter the Movie for the Sega Saturn. You can also hear me on their show from time to time, where I sometimes weigh in on even more Japanese games, including Nights into Dreams. You can also find their show on RetroGameSquad.com or follow them on Twitter with the handle @RetroGameSquad.
Is it over?
Thank you so much for tuning in to RetroNick Relics. If you liked this video, please be sure to slap those like and subscribe buttons, and tune in again to find out what I dig up next. I'm RetroNick.
And you'd be too if you were me.